Today we will work to fill in a map showing how industrialization spread. Let's begin by creating our key. If you take a look here, I've created a key using the colors orange, blue, and green. You can choose any three colors you wish. We begin by looking at the early 1800s, that is, those countries that are first to industrialize. Then we'll look at the countries that industrialized in the late 1800s, and finally we'll look at those countries that industrialized in the early 1900s. Let's get started. I'm going to first find Great Britain on the map. Great Britain, as you know, is the first country to industrialize. It industrializes in large part because of the textile industry. Textiles used to be created in people's homes, but then factories and the advent of machines were able to make that process much faster. So we're going to place our first eye on Great Britain here. Great Britain, of course, tries to limit the spread of technology and increase its competitive advantage. So it really tries to hold on to the secrets of making a machine and creating the factories that they had. But very soon, other countries figure out the process. And one of the first is the United States. So let's take another eye and place it on the United States. Let's also connect and draw an arrow from Great Britain to the United States to indicate that industrialization was spreading from England to the United States. If you recall, the United States really stole technology from Great Britain to begin its own industrialization. Major corporations formed in the United States in a laissez-faire government where corporations and investors were quick to make money, and the government took a hands-off approach to allow industry to grow. Industrialization is also quick to spread to what is Western Europe, that is this region here. It spreads to both Germany and France. So let's indicate that it's spreading to Germany and also spreading to France. This is referred to as Western Europe. So again, let's put an I there to indicate where we have France and Germany. All right. Now we discuss the countries that industrialized in the late 1800s. So let's place a lowercase I on Russia. If you could find Russia on your map. Here is Russia. And Russia industrializes in large part because Tsar Alexander II wanted to westernize and modernize Russia, but resisted any change to his autocratic government. So what that meant was there was some industrialization in Russia, but really limited by the social unrest created by having a dictator, essentially. Russia was a huge country, a large population, but this was largely an agricultural country. Also in the late 1800s, Japan industrializes. So let's place a lowercase I on Japan here. Japan chose to begin industrializing in order to compete with European nations, which actually helps pull Japan away from other Asian nations. It had a strong political system and was unified to support these industrialization changes within. Also industrializing in the late 1800s is the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire we haven't discussed in a little while, but here is the Ottoman Empire centered right here. It begins industrializing with building railroads and telegraphs and adopting European styles and culture. However, there is a lot of resistance within the Ottoman Empire from those traditionalists who were interested in keeping the Ottoman Empire the way it was. Um, those reforms end as leadership changes in the Ottoman Empire, and it goes back to a more um, agricultural and less industrialized place. The other place that is industrializing in the late 1800s is Egypt. So let's take another lowercase I and place that on Egypt here. Egypt begins industrializing after ending control of the Ottoman. Once the Ottomans leave Egypt, Egypt has then freedom. It begins industrializing. It largely copies what France did, and unfortunately, it has limited progress as leadership changes often within Egypt. Another place that industrializes in the late 1800s is South Africa. So again, let's place an I in South Africa here. Settlers from Europe, if you recall, settle in South Africa and bring with them those changes, those ideas of industrialization that they had learned in Europe. Industrialization was mostly limited to cities in South Africa. There was very limited industrialization in rural areas. And South Africa is a very large country, lots of rural space there. So we're really talking about the coastline where the major cities lie. Industrialization was supported by the British living there, not really the native people who were inhabiting South Africa or any other European settlers. Another place that industrializes in the late 1800s is Ethiopia. So let's take another lowercase I and place it on Ethiopia. Here's Ethiopia. Their leader, Menelik II, begins to industrialize Ethiopia, again copying what the Europeans had done. He's able to do so after defeating an Italian invasion. The hopes to gain strength, Ethiopia hopes to really gain strength so as not to be taken over by Europeans anymore, right? The Italians had invaded Ethiopia and had been turned back by Ethiopian soldiers. Please take a moment to draw arrows to indicate that industrialization is spreading from Western Europe to Eastern Europe, spreading to Asia, and spreading to Africa. Let's now pick up our third color, our final color, and take a look at those countries that industrialized in the early 1900s. Let's place an I, a lowercase I, in parentheses here on Mexico. Mexico industrializes in the early 1900s thanks to a government that led some modernization efforts. But primarily, those modernization efforts brought export goods to the coastline for export. The Mexican government continued to be often oppressive and underwent a number of rebellions within Mexico that really hampered industrialization in Mexico. Let's take another lowercase I in parentheses and place it on Brazil. Brazil's government favored wealthy property holders who didn't support development of competing industries. In large part, Brazil's government designed an export economy in which railroads were built from the interior of Brazil to the coastline to export raw materials. And finally, let's place another lowercase I on Argentina. Argentina industrializes in the early 1900s thanks to stable government that was able to initiate political reforms and modernize Argentina's economy. In addition, there were immigrants coming from Europe hoping to earn a higher wage in Argentina that provided a labor force there. Let's take a moment also to draw arrows from Europe to South America, indicating industrialization is spreading. So let's review our timeline of events here. Remember, industrialization begins in Great Britain in the early 1800s. It then spreads to Western Europe and to North America. In the late 1800s, industrialization spreads to Eastern Europe, it spreads to Asia, and spreads to Africa. And finally, industrialization in the early 1900s reaches South America and Central America. As we go forward, keep in mind this order of industrialization. Think about the advantages that may be gained by industrializing early and the disadvantages of industrializing later.